When I moved to Bow Valley Ranch, I was 6 years old. I moved with my mother and my father and my two older brothers, Michael and John. And we moved from Vancouver to Calgary. Uncle Pat Burns, the senator, bought it in 1902 from William Roper Hull, and we sold it to the province in 1972. The main purpose of the ranch was to raise cattle so that they could be sold, taken to the stockyards, and then sold through Burns and Company for distribution worldwide. My involvement in the daily goings-on at the ranch was simply to live there and to go into town and get an education. There was a full-time staff to take care of the daily stuff at the ranch, the operations. There was a foreman, and there were hired men and a cook and all that stuff. The first memories were both pleasant and sad. The pleasant ones were going to the creek to enjoy a picnic, or going for a ride, or playing flag football in the front yard, or just having a good time. We had so much land on which to play. We played in the creek because that's where the swimming hole was until a pool was built behind the house in the late 50s. Most weekends there'd be somebody visiting, and there'd be family and friends, or at New Year's we'd have a big New Year's party, which was basically the kids. And then there was one exceptional time where we got to host the Governor General and his wife on a state visit. The Governor General at the time was a guy by the name of Georges Vanier, whose son was Jean Vanier, who founded L'Arche, and Madame Vanier. The ranch sold to the province as Peter Lougheed's first act in 1970 as Premier in 1972. It was sold for the creation of Fish Creek Park, but really it was just part of the evolution of the sale of Bow Valley Ranch. When we moved there, I think I mentioned in 1951, the city limits were then 58th Avenue, which is where Chinook Shopping Center is now. And by the time that it was sold in 1972, the city limits were where Parkland is now, and was going to go into Fish Creek Park. And so Fish Creek Park was created partly to stop the urban sprawl, but partly because that part of Bow Valley Ranch, because it was a valley, was uninhabitable because it had been designated a floodplain. The feelings were what I call bittersweet. It was nice that it was a profitable transaction, but it also meant leaving my family home under, call it unpleasant circumstances, because Mom and Dad were separating and divorcing and drinking and that sort of stuff. So that part was very, very emotional and very hard. Right now, I'm involved in Fish Creek in what they call the Friends of Fish Creek Park, as what they call an ambassador. And the role of an ambassador is just to be there as a guide. As somebody comes into the visitor center and they have questions, there's an exhibit there, and I get to show them the exhibit, and not only from the perspective of the history of Fish Creek Park, but the perspective of the history of Bow Valley Ranch, which of course is my background.